Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back into my YouTube channel. It's time for another Windshield Time segment. Been spending quite a bit of time with a lot of windshield time after the FLW Title Championship up on Sturgeon Bay. Came home, wasn't even home for very long. I don't even know if I was just under a week, I guess I was home. Had loaded up my stuff and got ready for a Bass Central Open down here on Sam Rayburn. I went down, set up my camper, spend a day on the lake, and then wanted to come home, and because I'm only like 2 hours and 40 minutes, 45 minutes, depending upon where you are located on Sam Rayburn from the lake. So I wanted to come home and spend the weekend with my wife and kiddos, go to church, and be able to do things like that. And so it's Sunday evening. I'm headed back down for tomorrow's the first day of official practice for the Sam Rayburn Central Open. This is the second event on the Central Opens. There's going to be 4. The first one was on the Muskogee River. We had a video on that. And then we have this Sam Rayburn one. We also have one on Neely Henry. And then the last one will be on Lake Louisville, there near Dallas, or in Dallas proper. I wanted to talk a little bit about my last video where I was fishing on Lake Erie out of Sandusky. It was the 6th and final event to qualify me for the FLW Title Championship. I want to talk a little bit about my mindset, what I was thinking going into it, because you want to strategize for every event. You want to kind of have a strategy based on your practice. Now, we had actually 4 days of practice for that event. So 4 days of practice actually ended up being like 3.5 because I had to go to the service yard and get a Lowrance life sight put on the bow unit of my boat, just because that forward shooting technology is so important, especially in those smallmouth tournaments or tournaments where you're actually fishing for fish that are out, either suspended or out in front of the boat or chasing bait or different things like that. So I was able to get that done, and then I needed to get off the water in time enough to work on tackle and get ready for the first day of competition. So based on my practice, I had kind of 2 things going. I was able to catch a couple of smallmouth on drop shots and a couple of smallmouth on jerkbait, but it was hard to get 5. I think I only had 5 one day, maybe it was 4. Out there in practice in the out of Sandusky, around the islands out there. I wasn't quite sure. Obviously it wasn't phenomenal, it wasn't great even. It was a situation where I felt like it would be a grind to get 5, but if you got 5, you could possibly have a good bag. And then I went back out there to try to replicate it, and it was just really tough to get a bite. So I found it very spotty. So I wasn't quite sure on how much of that would be trustworthy, or how much I could actually depend on. And because I wasn't sure how much of that I could actually depend on, I didn't want to risk the opportunity to make the title championship on those smallmouth. Now, I felt like I could get more bites on the largemouth, but size was a factor, and it wasn't a whole lot better. So that first day, I actually went shallow with the idea, I'm going to go shallow and just try to get a few largemouth, and if I can get 5, and then go out and try to catch some smallmouth to add or increase my weight, to bulk me up in coal, or actually add to my limit depending upon how many largemouth I was able to catch. I thought that was going to be the better strategy, because I kind of figured that I needed to finish in the top 100 in order to make the title championship, because I'd had a decent season up to that point and was in 34th, I think, in the standings overall going into that event, and had been there through the last 3 events. So I knew that I needed to just not have just a tragically bad tournament, so I didn't want to risk a whole lot. So with that in mind, I thought, okay, we're going to try to play it safe. And playing it safe is kind of a double-edged sword. You can play it safe on tour, and the guys can just smash them, which is what they did. and it could end up biting you. And so playing it safe is not necessarily a good choice. You always got to be swinging and always have to be really pushing through for the maximum each day. Maximize your day. I've heard from Rick Lund and Takahiro. You want to be able to maximize your day out there on the water anytime you're in competition, and especially in tour level competition. So playing it safe was a little bit concerning, but I just really felt like it might be really difficult to catch a limit of smallmouth. So I went into those marinas and harbors and different things like that and tried to catch largemouth. Now, I fished a couple of places where I got 1 or 2 bites, but the size was a factor, like I said. And on day 1, the first fish was a largemouth, and then I caught a dogfish or a grinnell, and then I caught that largemouth, and then I think I caught a small one. And so I went to my B area, what I would call my B water, and then which I actually only had 2 bites there in practice. What I really needed to do was just try to figure out how much of a possibility of catching 5 in this area was even, if it was even a factor. And so I went to that other area and didn't realize, because in practice you fish really fast, not so thorough, and you have a tendency to fish right over some areas. But you do that all full well knowing that the name of the game is covering water in practice. All lakes across the country have a lot of areas that have nothing, with small areas that have something. So you've got to cover water, and because of that, I kind of fished over this area, had 1 little fish, and then I had a good bite, but it came off. So though I only had 2 bites in there, and then you saw what happened on day 1. I found that there was way more fish in there than I thought. And I actually went out and fished for smallmouth, and I had one follow me to the boat that looked like a good, decent one, just a decent one, and then I had another one that I had hooked up on a jerkbait, and he just came off. So I never was able to call on any smallmouth on day 1. Day 1 had me in 104th, which 97 guys were going to get paid in that event, and so I knew that I needed to, have the same kind of a day, but just a little bit better. So I figured if I could catch 12 pounds, because I had like 11 and a half the first day, if I could catch about 12 pounds, that would put me right where I needed to be, a little over 12 pounds. So I pushed hard, leaned hard, really fished the best of my ability, fished a clean day, only lost 1 good one that there was nothing I could do with it, just bound me up in a mixture of lily pads and grass. It came off on the punching rod. And so I tried to go out, and it just looked like it was going to be too much of a beater, and I knew that my smallmouth were kind of spread out, and I knew I didn't have enough time because I pushed those largemouth through most of the day and tried to catch as much weight and call up and call up and call up. I didn't want to leave there till I figured I at least had what I had the day before. I stayed in there for longer than I wanted to. I just wanted to know that, okay, at least I had what I had the day before, and then possibly could maybe get paid, but for sure, really banking on the thought that I could make the title championship if I could just duplicate my weight 2 days in a row. So that's what I did, and then I tried to get out after those smallmouth, like I said, and it just didn't seem like that was going to happen. So I went back into a harbor again. I culled up 1 more time, and then that was kind of it. And I knew it was kind of rough out there, so I wanted to head back towards takeoff, head back towards check-in. I made a quick little seat of my pants, shift on the fly, pulled out my Strike King KVD 1.5 square bill, and decided to crank a few rocks, and that's when I caught that smallmouth, which was, if it wasn't the biggest bass that I had for day 2, it was one of the bigger ones, and I think that's how I ended up boosting all the way up to just under 12 and a half pounds. That gave me my weight, and which was funny is I had 15 ounces more on day 2 than I had on day 1, but crazy enough, even with that, I still only moved up 1 place. I thought for sure I was going to get paid. I ended up missing a check by 5 ounces, and I ended up only moving 1 place, and so I went from 104 to 103, and the good news was I made the championship. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, was sometimes you can play it safe and it can bite you. And sometimes you recognize, okay, what's important here? Getting paid in this event or making it to the title championship and having a shot at $200,000. Not only that, but it was going to be MLF style format. We're going to have a boat official on the boat with the score tracker and that whole MLF setup right there. The opportunity for some camera time was going to be really important, and the opportunity to get a lot of exposure for my sponsors and myself. But there's some strategy that goes into year-end tournaments, qualifying for championships, classics, like when they had the Forestwood Cups and the All-American, making those championships. Those are super important because they can be life-changing events. Obviously, we all want to make those championships no matter what level of competition you're fishing at. And that was my mindset, make that championship. And based on a tough practice, that's where I set my sights, and that's what I wanted to share with all you guys. I think sometimes guys can be like, well, what are you doing trying to shoot for 100th? And that's not what I'm shooting for. But I had a super tough practice. See how I missed a lot of those smallmouth areas and a lot of how some of those guys were able to catch them in that event. And that's the way it kind of goes sometimes. Sometimes you can miss it by a little bit, and it seems like you missed it by a mile. At any rate, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you like this video. It's just kind of some insight into my thought process on that last event of the season, and of course qualifying for the title championship. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Feel like you have some friends that would really like it, go ahead and share it as well. And I appreciate you guys tuning into my YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for watching and good fishing.